ending up in the holy city of Meshed. I heard nothing but stories of torture, repression, and tyranny from very angry Iranians who spoke of ridding themselves of the Shah. It turned out that Mrs. Javits was a paid consultant to the government of Iran, and her husband Jacob, the U.S. Senator, no stranger to Iranian junkets and free caviar courtesy of the Shah, who was overthrown 14 years later. There is no fate so uncertain as the fate of books of travel, Joseph Conrad wrote in his preface to Richard Curl's Into the East. They are the most assailable of all men's literary productions. The man who writes a travel book delivers himself more than any other into the hands of his enemies. In my 1988 book of China travels, Riding the Iron Rooster, name a Chinese train and I took it, I suggested that the Chinese cops, the People's Armed Police, and the Chongguan peace officers had a taste for beating up students. I had traveled in China for a year. I had seen many demonstrations. The conventional wisdom in the West was that the Chinese government was reform-minded and tolerant. Reviewers spanked my book. But this was a year before the Tiananmen Square massacre. True travel and the inquiry of the essayist requires the simpler stratagems of being humble, patient, solitary, anonymous, and alert. These are not qualities one normally associates with duck-butted legislators on a fact-finding mission, or agents of virtue looking for someone to encumber with charity and free food, or journalists reporting high-level meetings, all of them in search of a welcome mat. That I am a well-off, fairly old, semi-well-known writer who can afford to fly first class and rent nice cars and stay in good hotels makes it all the more important that I travel in old clothes, on a small budget, on a bus or train or cattle truck. My natural element, and it has been the stuff of the travel narrative since Herodotus, is the low-level meeting. In Africa in 2001, I received little enlightenment from politicians, but quite a lot from talking to truck drivers, migrants, prostitutes, and farmers. Writers are also a source of inspiration, especially those writers who seem part of a particular landscape. In Buenos Aires, I sought out Borges. In Tangier, Paul Bowles. In Brazil, Jorge Amado. In Turkey, Yashar Kemal, and later Orhan Pamuk. Traveling in Africa, I spent time in Egypt with Naguib Mahfouz, and in Johannesburg with Nadine Gordimer. All travel writing and many essays seem to me to be summed up in the title of the enigmatic Francis Bacon painting, Studies for Figures in a Landscape. I enjoy comfort as much as the next traveler, and no one knows better than a writer how pleasant is the life removed, how dreary it is to haunt assemblies where youth and cost a witless bravery keeps. Sound familiar? This paraphrased admonition is the Duke in Shakespeare's Measure for Measure, who's a good model for the traveling writer. In order to find out what is really going on in his dukedom, the Duke says he needs to assume a humble disguise, such as a friar's habit, to visit both prince and people. The example of Harun al-Rashid, Caliph of Baghdad in the 8th century, is also salutary. The Caliph habitually disguised himself as a commoner, and went to the marketplace to find out how people lived, what complaints they had, what exercised their minds, what made them proud. The great travelers of the past peregrinated in this same mood of discovery. The medieval friars who visited China, the Japanese mendicants, the wandering diarists quoted extensively by the French historian Fernand Braudel in my favorite of his books, The Structures of Everyday Life. Official travel does not tell you what the world is like. Unofficial travel, by the eavesdropper and the buttonholer, does. Making my way from Cairo to Cape Town, peregrinating for my book of Africa travels, Dark Star Safari, I found myself in buses, on trucks, on ferries, canoes, and trains. I never had a name. I was never able to pull rank. I was sometimes Effendi or Faranji, but throughout Swahili-speaking Africa, I was Mzee, Pops, Grandpa, which is how I wanted it to be, an anonymous elder. There are risks, of course, in solo travel, but there are also great rewards. One is privileged enough in being an American traveler.